Oh, this is only letting me stream on one at a time, huh? Okay. So it looks like I'm streaming on YouTube. So I can get it set up to stream on YouTube or on Facebook, but not both. Well, I'm just going to do a YouTube stream because I know I'm going to need a YouTube link more than I will need a Facebook link. Yeah, it's only letting me do one at a time. Last time I did a live stream on Facebook and YouTube at the same time. I'm very surprised it's not letting me do that. Oh well, Zoom has been really disappointing me lately. It does some things well, not others. Well, if you're watching this, there's going to be more people on here in the next 10 minutes or so. I'm hosting a live book club on the Thought Leaders Practice. And I'm probably going to edit this part out of the video later and pop it over to a few different places. I'm going to be hosting one of these every week for 5 weeks. And we're going to talk about 3 chapters in this book every week for 5 weeks. Thought Leaders Practice, best business book I read in 2019. And I'm reading it again now in 2020. So it's going to be fun. I'm just going to kill some time while I'm waiting for people to show up. And this is how I like to kill time. 90% of all drops are done by jugglers. I decided to pick juggling up again when I read Deep Work by Cal Newport. This book right here has something in it called active meditation, where you got to do something with your body while you are thinking. And this kind of frees up your mind so that you can think about problems. And having that thinking time, that's something that I had not been doing enough of. I had been avoiding it, and I wasn't doing the thinking part of being a thought leader. And so now I've got a folder full of pink sheets, and I've got time scheduled all the time to do my thinking. And that's been a lot of fun to get that going again. And yeah, so I'm actually going to be doing a lot of juggling later this afternoon. I am not recording yet, which is all good because I don't have people here. I'm just stalling on YouTube. I don't even know if anybody is watching. If you're watching this early part of it, that's probably going to be cut out. Give me a comment below and just tell me, like, I don't know, anything. Because I'm not even sure if this piece is going to go live. And so I'm kind of curious if it does. I've got people scheduled to come in the next 6 minutes. So I'm just killing time until then. Because streaming software is surprisingly difficult. I'm surprised at how tough it is to get live streaming to work through Zoom. I had to download OBS and get all this other stuff going. But now that it's there, it's happening. Oh, wow, that makes my lighting look awful. I want to transform this place into like a recording studio. I'm probably going to have to get up against one of the walls, do something different with the lighting because, you know, when I move around, really messes some things up. All right. I'm going to turn off the music and wait politely for people to show up and just stall for time, I guess. No, you know what? We need some more music here. Should have people showing up in about 5 minutes. Talk about this book, these ideas. We're going to talk for about an hour and then break. And come back next week and talk about the next 3 chapters. Can also do some of this. Maybe some of this. Oh. Maybe not. Hey there, Sonia. How you doing?
Hey, good, Kaylin. How are you?
Good, good. Just hanging out, getting things ready. We are streaming live on YouTube, and we're going to start recording in just a couple minutes so that we
Wow.
can share our insights on this book with everybody around the world. Because we can do that
Cool.
now. You and I can talk across the globe. I'm in New
Yes, we
Zealand,
can.
and you're in Minnesota. Where are you right now?
No, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Charlotte, North Carolina. Wow. So we
Mhm.
are far apart, and we are talking to each other as if we were in the same room.
That's correct. And I'm going to have to fix my
Amazing.
yes, I'm going to have to fix my lighting here because I am in the dark. Yes, I'm going to leave for a second and turn another light on so I'm not so shadowed.
Cool. All right.
Be right back. Okay.
Hello, Rumi.
Much better.
I can totally see you now, Sonia.
Right. That's the office.
Hey, yeah. So are you in your office there in Wellington?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Great. Thank you for joining us today.
Always. And hi, Sonia, wherever you are.
Hi, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina in the U.S.
Cool. What's your time there?
It is 6:58 p.m.
Cool. Still decent hour. Civilized hour.
And where are you?
Wellington, just like Kaylin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're both New Zealanders.
Okay. So what time is it there for you?
It's 1 in the afternoon on Monday.
Oh, okay. So you're way ahead of me.
Yeah, we live in the future.
Yeah.
Hi there, Matt.
Good morning.
Thanks for
Good
joining us.
afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, as Cole would say.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, because when you have people all over the world, time really has no meaning.
Absolutely.
We're in the eternal now.
Right.
And where in the world are you, Matt?
I'm out of Melbourne.
You're in where?
Melbourne?
Melbourne in Australia.
Melbourne.
Melbourne, to those who maybe have a different accent.
We're going to be having people from a lot of different countries today.
Okay, great.
I did have a few cancellations come in. There were about a dozen people registered, and a couple of people emailed today and said, oh my gosh, can't do it.
Yeah.
And it turns out next week's meeting, there's a conflict with the US Super Bowl.
Oh, yes.
Is a big thing over there for some reason.
Well, I only watch it for the commercials. I have no skin in the game. So no horse in the race.
Yeah.
So, but I watch the commercials.
Yeah, I used to, when I lived in the States, I used to keep the television on mute during the game and then unmute during the commercials. But now I found it so much easier because I can't even really live stream it here, just to wait a day and then watch a playlist on YouTube. And somebody will put together all the commercials and then I have them all right there.
Well, actually, Ad Age puts a string of commercials together that you can view before the Super Bowl. So they will come out this week if they haven't already, because I'm on their daily email list. And so, yes, I have already seen one or two, but they give you, because that is a weekly or daily that's geared towards people in the ad agency world. But yeah, I've seen a few, and they give you kind of a heads up about what's coming. So,
cool. Great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and start the recording, and other people might drop in. We'll see. But let's go ahead and get started. All right. Hello, this is Kaylin Huntress, and today I'm hosting a book club for the Thought Leaders Practice. This is going to be a 5-week virtual book club where thought leaders and I are going to talk about one section per week, and each section is 3 chapters. And so this week, what we're going to be talking about is section 1, business model. Chapter 1 is practice versus business. Chapter 2 is cluster strategy. And chapter 3 is the 10-year plan. Now, before we get started, I'd like to go around and just have everybody introduce who they are and what they do and why they're amazing. So, Matt, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Good morning, Caitlin. My background is in high-performing teams, particularly in the technology industry and product development. I'm excited to be here. I've read the book many, many times, but it's great to be sharing this with everyone here.
Awesome. Great. Thanks for coming. So, Rumi, tell us about you.
Rumi Shivers, Wellington. I've been in software business all my life. And so I have one niche company that specializes on data visualization, data science. I came across Thought Leadership book very recently. I heard about it a few times, but only came across. I had the Thought Leaders book with me, but didn't have the practice with me. So, and through someone, I got that book recently, and I just powered through the whole thing. And yeah, very, very intrigued, interested, developing my speaking and coaching, or mentoring, not coaching, mentoring component of my business. I'll continue my software side, but these two will be another two, what they call the plates, spinning plates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. Great. And Sonia, tell us about you.
I'm a communications coach and consultant. I also am a speaker. And I was introduced to this book about 2 years ago, and I read it, and it's time to kind of look at a different model or expand in particular areas. And so I thought this would be a good way to start the new year to reevaluate where I am and where I want to be.
Awesome. Great. And it looks like we've had Aaron join us as well. Hi, Aaron. Thanks for joining us. Great. Well, you came in just at the right time. We're doing introductions. Why don't you tell us who you are, what you do, and why you're amazing? Uh-oh, I don't...
Well, I'm good now. Why I'm amazing? Did I hear that last part?
No, what we want to know is 3 things: who you are, what you do, and why you're amazing.
Wow. All right. Well, the easy one is, name is Aaron Groh. I work in education, mostly university work, but I'm trying to branch out to professional speaking, training in the area of management improvement. And I think I'm amazing because I could provide that type of those keynoting and training in both English and Mandarin Chinese. How's that?
Wow, nice. English and Mandarin Chinese. That's amazing.
I spent a lot of years over in Asia and China in particular. I was just there a couple of weeks ago. I think there's a big market there, but I've got to figure out how to get into it.
Cool. Great. Well, hopefully this book will give us some clues on how to do that.
I think it might, yeah.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know me very well, I'm Kaylin Huntress. I spent 10 years as a solopreneur and digital marketer, and I'm now making the transition into thought leadership. I'm a speaker, a coach, and a trainer, and the fields that I talk about are marketing, sales, and work-life balance. And I'm enrolled in the program for Thought Leaders Business School, and I've been learning so much from their curriculum about how to transition out of offering one-to-one consulting services and into thought leadership. And I just find it fascinating. And so I'm really excited that you're all here to join me to talk about the foundational concepts in this book. So in the first chapter, where they talk about the difference between a business and a practice, they lay out why they think a practice is superior for the types of people who do the work that we do. But there are many thought leaders that also run businesses. They either have in the past or they run them simultaneously, like Rumi does, where you have a business and a practice at the same time. So the question I'd like to open with is, when is a business better than a practice?
Can I ask why that question? Why do you ask that question?
Why that question? Because I feel it'll help us illuminate where the strengths of a practice really lie if we know on the opposite side when a business is the right move for an entrepreneur.
Sure. Well, a business has the opportunity to sell it, I guess. So if somebody's in the interest of creating something that can simply be sold for somebody else to do, that would make sense. Practice is very much we are the business. So
Right.
Once we're done, our business is done, if I understand it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can bounce off that. I was just rereading this morning as a prep for this call, the book, and something that stood out for me was, business is for someone who wants freedom and income, whereas a practice is for somebody who wants fulfillment and income, and that neither is right or wrong, but both have, a different focus.
It's a really good distinction.
And I think a practice also has freedom and flexibility where a business may not. So if you're at the stage of life where you're looking for a fulfillment and flexibility, the practice to me looks like the best option, at least from my vantage point.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, Sonia, because I see one of the advantages to a practice is that you have the freedom to pivot.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about how a practice is more agile. It's more like a speedboat, and a business is more like a battleship. It takes a long time to turn. I really like that metaphor. And so I wonder, what is the freedom that a business really gets? Because as an entrepreneur, as a solopreneur specifically, I have the freedom to choose what I work on. But if I have a business, I feel I would be more locked in to the types of work that I do, and I wouldn't be as free. So what kind of freedom is it that they mean that a business has?
I think the model is different. So if you look at a business, I think they're talking more about you sell the business and that creates freedom. Whereas in practice, you're not selling a practice, you're doing it for, it's a 10-year game. You're actually looking at it as though this is going to be my existence. This is why it needs to be focused on fulfillment, because I'm going to spend time. It doesn't, to Sonia's point, it doesn't reduce the flexibility. It gives you the flexibility, but it's the focus is more about this is something I'm doing for the long haul versus this is something I'm going to flip, if that makes sense.
Well, and I also see it from the perspective of I want the flexibility now. Kaylin talked earlier about he works with work-life balance. I don't believe there is a work-life balance. You can have it all, but you just can't have it all at once. So as a woman who has a family, for me, the priority is being able to be flexible enough to schedule my work around other priorities. Not that work isn't a priority, but I think there are times when family comes first and there are times when work comes first. And a practice gives me the ability to be able to juggle all balls at all times and not drop any of them.
Yeah, I think Jeff Bezos talks about work-life harmony as opposed to work-life balance, because I think we live in a world now where the two overlap so much that it's almost impossible to draw. The idea of coming home at 6 o'clock and switching off is just, I don't know about you guys, but there's email, there's late calls, there's international time zones, there's all sorts of challenges that we face in that.
Yeah. Even on a business side, because I've been on business for 20 years now, you can design in such a way you still have the freedom and fulfillment. So, but the bigger it gets, it's harder it becomes. So if you can keep a niche operation, then you still can have that component as well.
So Rumi, what would you say are the unique advantages of a business that a practice does not share?
Leverage of other people's time and skills. So I have very small business, only 3 of us here, but 2 people generate income. Even if I'm on holiday, I can take off and be away for 6 weeks. And all I have to focus is on making sure the pipeline is there, make sure the work is secured, and then I can, on a weekly basis, I can keep in touch with the team and cash flow comes in which is awesome.
So would you be unable to do that in a practice?
Oh, you can do that in practice as well. But at the leveraging of your time, I think you talk about, I think beyond black belt or some level, you don't try to do it on day one. I think beyond, I can't remember which belt it is, green or yellow or what.
It might be red belt, the leverage one. Yeah.
It's at a later point, you try and get other people to deliver your IP, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And would you say, it doesn't seem that that's what your income producing employees are doing for you right now. It doesn't seem that they're leveraging that they're delivering your IP. So what is it that they're doing that a practice member would not be doing?
What is that they're doing? So the practice, how do I answer this question? In a business, it's pretty much like a process and system, isn't it? Really, you have specific domain expertise. Mm-hmm. It's like building something. Mm-hmm. So it's a process of building something, and you have a skill set around it. And as long as you have the skill set to build that widget thing, and you've got the system, as a business owner, all I'm doing is selling it. That's it.
Right.
And making sure the end quality is to the level that I promised the customer it would be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good distinction, is that businesses are more about the process.
Yes.
And that process is really transferable because you don't need to be there for that.
No.
But in a practice, your presence is really required. It's very difficult to deliver the secret sauce that you as a thought leader provide without you there as an individual.
Yeah, you can't get somebody else to do your keynote, right?
Right, that's right.
It won't be the same. You could probably do it, but it won't be the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm fascinated by this dichotomy between a practice and a business, because I've worked with so many people from both sides of this line, but I haven't been able to really codify what the advantages are on one side or another, so that if I was working with somebody and they said, hey, I'm dealing with this, this, and this, I'd say, oh, you need a practice, or you need a business. And so I'm really interested in what are those clear distinctions between the two.
See, the practice in a lot of ways is less risky.
Oh, really? Say more.
A business, you need to have at least some staff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that the level of risk you take goes up a few more levels.
Right. You need a lot more funding.
Yeah.
Because you have staff and office space.
Responsibility, exactly. Even if you don't have work, you still have to pay.
Mm-hmm. So that's a really clear distinction right there. I heard a story about a consultant from 20, 30 years ago who went out on his own, and he was working out of his garage. And on the top of his computer screen, he had a sign that said overhead equals death. And he just kept, this was at a time before people were running businesses like we do, like practices. And so the idea that he was running his own consultancy out of a garage, it was rather radical at the time. But he was able to keep his overhead low enough that he could support his family. And he was always reminding himself that anything he would do that would contribute to overhead was on the path to ruin. And so he was able to, run his business very lean that way. Has anybody ever had the desire to get out of the practice game and get into the business game?
For me, no. No, I think just because I like the ability to pivot and evolve as my practice grows, to stay current with trends. For me, the flexibility has always been a key. If people had to depend on, I think if I owned a business, I'd have employees who were dependent on the work that I did, and they would also support it. So I like the idea of I can do what I want and how I want, and there's no one to look to me to depend on me to help with their income.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility knowing that somebody else's paycheck is reliant on your success.
Mhm.
Yeah. There have been times when I have wanted to set a business up and spin that off because I like the idea that, oh, I can set up an e-commerce store and sell this thing, and then the wheels will just be running without me there. You know, sort of a 4-hour work week model where I'm the ghost in the machine, get the system set up, the process, and then just, you know, put activity in the top and get dollars out of the bottom. But I often find it doesn't work that way. It seems like a really great idea, but then when you get in the weeds, it's always a full-time job, many full-time jobs often, you know? And so a business, it seems like it's just a lot more work and a lot more responsibility than a practice where it's really just you and you maintain that agility to pivot from project to project as you like.
You could also have products that where you could derive passive income.
Mm-hmm. You mean under
So
a practice?
yes, I think that could be a practice model.
Mm-hmm.
You still would not have employees. I mean, you have developed tangible products that can be sold while you sleep, you know, through e-commerce. So I think that's another facet where of a practice where, I mean, it's still income that you can derive when, you know, yes, after you've put in the work, but that still doesn't, for me, define that what you have is a business.
Mm-hmm. It might be a sub business under the practice. You know, I
Mhm.
guess, could you sell it? You know, I'm seeing an interesting pivot happen right now in the wild right now. There's a content marketer that I follow. I've been a fan of her for 10 years, and she's just an amazing content marketer. And she runs a blog and sells products and does training. But her business brand is called IttyBiz. And it's at ittybiz.com. And she's got all this great content marketing templates and programs for sale. I really like her stuff. And she's retiring and she's handing the business over to her longtime staff. And so it's very interesting to see her, because IttyBiz has always been Naomi, the person who runs it. It's always been, to me, it's always been like, oh yeah, that's her business brand. But I kind of have seen it as a practice. And she's actually transitioning to have somebody else take it over. And so it draws this really interesting question for me. What's the difference between a business brand and a personal brand?
I'd be curious to see how her business evolves or her practice evolves after the people who she is giving it to, you know, what they do with it.
You and me both. I'm really curious to see how this plays out.
Mm-hmm. My guess is that it will change.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Yeah, it might take us 18 months to really see what kind of transition they go through. But man, I'm really interested to see how that plays out.
In that case, it's really become a business, right? Not a practice anymore.
Right. Well, she's been operating it as a practice, and now she's selling it as a business. And from the entrepreneur's perspective, if you make a successful exit, I mean, does it matter if it doesn't work after that?
Exactly. That's right.
I mean, many people have practices in the traditional sense, lawyers, doctors, they'll sell their business as well. But for the most part, it's just selling their clients, the client list, and that they nurtured over the years they've been in business.
Yes, and how many people switch at that point to another practice because the person they had been, the doctor or lawyer they had been seeing, is no longer there.
Right.
Yeah. For me, that for me is the perfect exit point to find. Yes, I might, you know, string along for that first visit or two to see if it's a fit.
Right.
But generally speaking, I'm in the market for another practice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's such a good example of a lawyer or a doctor selling their client list, because really they're selling their name and their book of business, and sometimes the buyer keeps the name, and sometimes they transition to a new name, but really all they're buying is hot leads.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. So years and years ago, I was part of a company that was purchased. It was a merger. It really wasn't a merger. It was a purchase. And I was bought because I was the top sales producer. You can't buy relationships. The reason why they wanted me is because I held those relationships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And because I wasn't treated well by the company that purchased me, I left. So I don't believe you can purchase. I have a very strong philosophy that you cannot purchase relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can buy someone's hands, but you can't buy their heart.
Ooh, that's really good. Is that a pink sheet of yours? Because it should be. Oh, that's great. Oh man, this has been such a great conversation on chapter 1. And I'd like to move on to chapter 2, where they talk about the cluster strategy. And that a cluster is a combination of message and market and method. Now, out of those 3, if you could only pick 2 of them to have solid, and one of them was your weak leg, which would you pick?
I think for me, it's very straightforward. It's market. I think
Yeah.
finding your niche is tough, and I think for me, that's what makes the cluster strategy really attractive, is that it sort of forces you to iterate on, things. And me personally, I feel more confident in the message and the method, which is coaching and mentoring and training. But the market is the one that I struggle most with. So, having that model to sort of tease out and try different things for me is kind of powerful.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that right now, your market is your weak leg.
That's right. Yeah.
But if to have the market as the strong leg and one of the others as a weak leg, would you prefer it that way, or do you like it the way it is now?
That is a really good probing question. I think for me, I guess my reflection in coming into Thought Leaders was really that I've long held a lot of messages, stuff that I've collected over the years from experience and wide reading and things like that. So that's fine. Methods, I've done a lot of self-development, learned coaching, learned training, those kinds of things, speaking. Market is the one that's kind of more dynamic. I don't have as much control over that. So for me, that's the one that, you have to keep changing almost, because the market keeps moving. So I don't think I would change that. I think I'm kind of comfortable with those 2 strengths, and just have to face into the challenge of the market.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd have to agree with Matt, because I think my message is and method are my stronger points, definitely strong points. The market, I go into several markets. I don't really have a very strong market that I'm taking it into. And that I could see as a weakness. But then my message and method are applicable to several markets.
Mm-hmm.
So this is always, if I could get clarity around the market, I could probably accelerate sales and more business.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Caitlin, your question was if we could choose one to be our weak link. Did I hear that right?
That's right. Yeah.
All right. If I could choose one to be the weak link, it would be method. And the reason I say that is because I have worked with a lot of businesses who had more clients than they could deal with. They had a very clear market that they were serving and a message that they had or a service they provided. but their methods were horrible. And yet they were successful businesses. I mean, they had plenty of product, plenty of business, more than they could handle, even though their processes were all over the place. So that would be the one I'd choose if I had the market down and the message right. You know, I could figure out the methods eventually if those other two things seem to be spot on. I've just seen a lot of businesses that stayed in business even though their methods sucked. So that would be the one I'd choose. The one I'm just struggling with is market, but that's a different question.
Well,
or rather marketing. It's not so much identifications.
I'm a marketer as a profession, and I struggle with market. So it's not anything that gets easier over time. I really do think market is the toughest one. And so that's why I would pick market as one of my stronger ones. And I'd pick message as the other strong one. And method, like you, Aaron, I would go with method as the weak leg. Because, you know, I've got a book here that'll teach me about the method. And there's training programs I can go to learn about the method. But if I have message and market aligned, and I can say a message to a market that they really resonate with, I can figure out something to sell them. And they
You're
will.
in business. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Kelly. Hi. Glad you could make it. So what about you, Rumi? Do you have any thoughts on which of the three?
Yeah. I suppose coming from business side and looking at the whole building of practice now on parallel, because I still continue to do my business until I die. So because that's my technology passion area. And from a thought leader practice point of view, my focus point is the market. Basically, identified the market that I want to serve. So I got a very clear picture on that market segment. So that's and then use the book, as you said, or everything else is there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but having a clear picture on the market as my first plate.
So market is something that we all struggle with. Why? Why is market tough?
Shouldn't be though. No, what I'm saying is, I think, at least from my point of view, market is the easiest one.
So that's really interesting. Why do you think market is easy for you and it's challenging for others?
I don't know how to answer that question. It's maybe because it's something that I've been thinking on for a long time. So I'll give you an example. So in my world, I see a lot of my friends who are probably getting into their late 50s, perhaps, and coming into their last gig, in a way, and not knowing what the hell to do next. Right? They got so much of IP, but they don't know what to do next. So thought leaders practice has given me the framework that I can offer to them. This is something that I've been working about for a long time. A lot of people come into retirement and they think, what the hell? What do you do next? But at that point, it's too late. So my market is people 55 plus thinking about what are they going to do. And I'm saying you need to develop your practice behind the scenes over 2 years at least. It takes time. Otherwise, you retire, come as a consultant to the market, and you'll be just dead. Because there'll be so many consultants who are generalists.
Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting market that you've chosen, because people at that age who've worked an entire career, they've got experience behind them, and they often have funds because they've been working in a job, and they're looking, how do I transition into running my legacy business?
Yeah, exactly.
Something that I can leave behind.
I tell them, if they have a lot of money, if they have 25,000 Australian dollars, just go to Sydney or Melbourne, get it done with at Thought Leaders Business School. But if they can't afford that level of investment, and then I said, go and buy the book, do it yourself. And if you can't do in between, then come to me.
Mm-hmm. So Kelly, tell us about your market. We're talking about the cluster strategy and about message, market, and method. And we've been talking about market for a while. Tell us about you.
So I've had, is everyone going into their first immersion in February? Or are people, you've been in this for a while?
Not all of us are in business school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so
some of us are, but not all of us are.
Who is in business school? Hands up. Okay, you and me, and everyone else is in the other before bit. Okay, so I got the book and I'm going into business school. My first immersion is in February. And before you go into business school, they have a little call with you. And I had a call with Christina Godotti is her name. And what I thought I was a thought leader in, turns out after having a chat with her that I should pivot. So I'm in the middle of going, here's what I thought I was an expert in. I run a podcast guest booking agency. It's getting booked on podcasts, it's interviews, it's being an expert in media. But after having spoken to her, I'm now realizing that it's personal branding. So in that, it's changed my, holy crap, I have to unpack all this and learn all this and like relearn. I know a lot of stuff, but relearning it, repackaging it, knowing it to pass it along. But then it's also, so what, who cares, who will buy the thing? Because I can teach you how to get booked on podcasts and all that, but then great, thanks very much, see you later. Ain't nobody going to pay for that after a certain period of time. So with that, I've been through a big, intense 2 weeks of unpacking this IP. And from that, I've recognized 2 different markets that I hadn't seen before. So I realize that's a long answer to the question, but I guess it shows you that what you think you know and where you're going sometimes isn't. And then it opens the door to this whole other thing. And it's like a magic eye picture that you just couldn't see. And then suddenly you can see. Mm-hmm. So my market is personally branded businesses who need, like if you're a coach or an entrepreneur, if it relies on you. And then also, which I don't know about you guys, but unpacking your IP, does it keep you awake at night? And it's like work while you're here cooking your chicken, it's working away, figuring stuff out like by itself. And then it just comes to light. So I've discovered my other market is going to be college students, because personal branding is getting your internship, getting your job interview, and your personal brand will go with you throughout life, regardless of the job that you do, the business that you open. So I've had all these huge breakthroughs, and I feel like I'm slightly going mad or having a beautiful mind moment in the last 2 weeks, but it's been amazing.
You have string all over your walls, Kelly?
I'd had Post-it notes all over my walls, but that was the podcasting one. And now I've got books and it's filled with models. Yeah. And the models have been able to, because personal branding sounds easy and basic, and it is. But it's like, what do I do? How do I do this? What is it? How do I explain it to someone else? Are they going to pay for it? Is it a different story? Mm-hmm. And in making the models, it's helped me understand it myself.
Yeah, pink sheets are definitely powerful, as are the green sheets, hey?
The green, I haven't even got, and then I'm like, okay, I know the market. That bit I've got. I've got, that's a long explanation of basically 14 to 18 hours a day for the last 2 weeks, where I'm like, okay, I'm not an expert in what I thought I was. I need to do something different. Holy shit balls.
Well, this is the advantage of having a practice, is that you can pivot to different things. And it seems like once you have your method and your message, then you can pivot through different markets. You know, and I've seen a lot of the experienced thought leaders do this, where they have a clear message and they have a couple of favored methods, and then they bring it to a market. And then 6 months later, they'll take that same message and method and they'll bring it to another market. And that pivot seems to be the really profitable one that people make when they're going up through the belts. It's like, Peter Cook has this one cluster that is for bookkeepers. And he's got this training program for bookkeeping agencies. And to take that model and pivot it to, CPAs, to lawyers' practices, to different similar kinds of businesses that have with the same message and method, it's very transferable. And that's what I like so much about the cluster strategy, is that it seems to transfer really well in a lot of different avenues, but it might not do it all the time. Are there any transfers that would be more difficult, that would have a lot more friction?
I think the message, I was speaking to one of the Thought Leaders Tribe this week, I won't name names, but she was telling me how, you know, for her, when she got into this game, she felt like she was trapped by her experience and background, and that people saw her in this particular way because of who she'd become and her identity, I suppose. And where she sees herself going is quite different. It's a real pivot away from, you know, different message, different market, maybe even different method. And the conversation we had was around, isn't it beautiful that you can potentially use the cluster strategy to sort of lily pad from what I have now and what I'm known for now to where I ultimately see myself going, and sort of use that as a way to navigate through the different types of IPs and the different types of market. So I think, you know, message is for me, coming back to your question, a message for me is the tough one, because you really have to build a lot of IP there. Whereas to pivot, you know, a market, if you've got some IP already, or to pivot a method, you know, is really, to me, the method is really, how does the client want to buy, more so than how do you want to deliver. I mean, there's certainly an element of, you know, I think you've got control over that because you can choose which one you want to do, but it's sort of, you know, Pete always says, be easy to buy, right? So if they're looking for a coaching, if you're selling a coaching program and they're looking for a training program, you're gonna struggle. You're probably gonna want to pivot that easily. Whereas the message, you know, it's kind of more tangible, it's more concrete, by and large, I think.
Great points, Matt. Yeah, I think you're right that it's more difficult to pivot on message, because after you've been branding yourself with a specific type of message for a while, that's how people know you. Yeah, they have in the book, they have in the overlaps between the three circles in the Venn diagram, the preferences between market and method is how they like to consume the content. And that seems to be static. It's not something that we can really affect. If there's a market that prefers to be coached one-on-one, it's really hard to say, no. You need to read my book. You need to join this training program, because it's their preferences. And so we kind of have to divine what is already out there in the market, how they already like to consume. And so do we have control over only some of these aspects of the cluster strategy? Do we have control over the market, or do we just find it out? Because we can share our message and change our message, right? We can also change the method if we want to. But the market, is that changeable?
It's not changeable, it's identification. You're not creating a market, you're identifying it.
Right.
I think you're also identifying specific needs where your message resonates. So as far as communication skills, that's a need in almost every market. But in order to be successful, I need to get really specific and illustrate or demonstrate that I understand their niche. And I think that's where the challenge comes in.
That's very interesting, Sonia, because what you've uncovered is that the market is not just the niche, it's also the need. And you've got to have both of them, you know, because if you know the niche, but you don't know the need, the market's not going to care. So if you have a niche that you're serving and you have a cluster to serve a particular need, and then you just change the need, you keep the same market, the same niche, the same message, and the same method. Is that a new cluster? Just by changing the need?
Can you say that again, please?
Yeah. So we look at the cluster strategy as message, market, and method. And when we look at market, if we say the market is both a niche and a need, if we just change one of them, just change the need, does that mean it's a whole new cluster?
I'd say that's where your positioning comes in.
Yeah.
It's the same cluster with a different positioning matrix.
Ah, good point. Good point.
Explain that, Matt. Expand on that.
Yeah, so in the book and in the curriculum, Matt and Pete talk about the positioning matrix, which is a 3x3 graph of who you're talking to in what context and what level of energy. And so you can build out a positioning matrix around that for your cluster. And so you could have the same cluster, the same message, the same market, and the same method, but how you position that to directly address a specific problem within that market, which you've sort of identified as the need within the niche. That's where your positioning matrix comes in. So that's the tooling from curriculum for that.
You know what I like so much about that insight, Matt, is that if you pivot to a different market that has the same need, you would use the same positioning matrix as you did with the previous niche, because it's just the problems that you're talking about and how you relate to them. It doesn't actually have to do with the demographic.
Right.
Wow, that's fascinating. Cool. Well, we've covered a lot of great ground on the cluster strategy. I'm really happy with the insights that we uncovered there. But now I want to move on to chapter 3, where they talk about financial independence, the 10-year plan. And they say that over 10 years, you want to get to black belt, earning $720,000 a year for 10 years so that you can attain financial independence. And the two numbers that they give that are so important here are $5 million and 10 years. And they say if you're a black belt for 10 years in a row, you can save $5 million and then use that to pay your bills for the rest of your life so that you can work if you want to, but you don't have to. And so my question is, if you built your practice so that you had $5 million 10 years from now, what would your life be like?
I think it's not so much my life. I think it's so much my kids and grandkids. Because I still need a reason to get out of bed every morning. I still need a fulfillment and purpose. So I don't think my life would be drastically different. I could be sitting on all this wealth, but what's the purpose of that unless an inner need for me is being met? What else would I do? What else could I do? It's a nice thought. I would give it away.
I think it gives you opportunity to increase the impact you can make, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just use the freedom to do what you want to do in a much larger scale.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what you want to do, rather than like.
Well, for you personally, Rumi, what would that look like for you? How would you personally increase your impact at a larger scale with those sorts of funds at your disposal?
I haven't thought about that to that stage yet, right? But I was born in Sri Lanka. I've been in New Zealand for 32 years now. But I love entrepreneurship, helping people to get into business as soon as, whether it's a solo or running a practice or running a business. If more people can get down that path, than just going on to the employment path and just grinding 30, 40 years, and that'll be an awesome thing to have an impact on. Right? Mm-hmm. So,
I think for me, the defining word is legacy. I think that's really, purpose beyond our life. I've had this experience a few times in my consulting business, which is sometimes you plant a tree under which you'll never sit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And for me, that's kind of what this is about. It's about my kids. I have 2 young children and I want to see them a little bit like what Rumi's saying, grow up and have a bit more of an entrepreneurial mindset. I believe the world that is coming is much more about the value you deliver than the hours you spend. And so that's where I think this, ideas come at a time. And I think for me, the thought leaders practice has come at a time where, you know, it's an interesting point in our history. So it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. But for me, I feel like we all chase purpose, right? Significance at some level. And this gives you the opportunity to do that. And to sort of Sonia's point, you get to a point where the money doesn't matter anymore and you're really just fulfilling your purpose. And that comes back to that idea of a difference between a practice and a business, which is fulfillment versus freedom. Because to me, fulfillment is you still have the freedom, but you're actually, you know, filled up by it, as opposed to someone who sells a business and then says, well, what the heck am I going to do now? You know, I've spent 20 years building this business. I've now sold it for a bucket load of money. What's my purpose?
Now what?
Whereas the thought leaders practice has that built in for me. And I find that quite exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's nice that they bake that into their practice formula. Yeah. What about you, Aaron? What would your life be like?
I think there'd be a lot less stress, even before we reach that point. Even getting to that point and having that type of an income year in, year out for several years in a row would create a very different vibe just in my life, and one that would be very enjoyable, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just the necessity of life wouldn't be, they'd be taken care of. And we talk about Maslow's hierarchy and things like that. And we could certainly get closer to the top of that pinnacle with resources just taken care of.
Mm-hmm. It'll allow you to focus on those higher levels because your attention isn't constantly being dragged back down to the lower levels.
Yeah. And as has been said, not just for me, but for those around me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what about you, Kelly? What would your life be like?
Less, but better. Less work,
Better.
less hassle, less worry, better quality all around. So I don't have the kids, the legacy thing. Like, I realize other people totally want to do that, but I just want like a comfortable, awesome life. And yeah, I know I'm not saving the world and changing the world. So less, but better.
That's a great answer. Very compact. And I find that this is part of what the pink sheeting process teaches you how to do, is how do you distill your ideas down into the most compact form. Well, I'm really looking forward to becoming a black belt and to staying there for 10 years. And, you know, like you, Sonia, my whole focus is my kids and being able to provide them the opportunities to do what they want to do when they're young. You know, when they are 20 years old and they want to backpack Europe, being able to give them a credit card and say, there you go, kid, go have fun. Come back in a couple of months, you know, or if they want to start a business or a venture, instead of them having to think, how do I survive through this? They instead have the opportunity to thrive through it, you know, because I didn't have that. When I was young, I went through extreme periods of poverty and I was homeless when I graduated high school, and getting through college was a real trial. And I never had the flexibility to say, well, what if I did this for a little while? And my choices were always limited by, how do I survive this? And so I've always been working really hard to, you know, keep myself from falling back into poverty. And that's been what I've done for decades. And so becoming financially independent and rearing my children in an environment where they don't have those struggles, that's my big purpose in life. But here's
that's really interesting, Kaylin. You know, I guess where I've come to is the struggle is the story.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, even achieving that level of income and financial freedom is not about giving to them. It's actually about enabling them to go on their own journey and to learn from the things that I've done. So you see a lot of, you know, high wealth individuals now not bequeathing their lot to their offspring for exactly this reason, because they've recognized that the struggle is the story. And I just, you know, if you find these kids, you know, the rich kids who just have all this money and they don't really know what to do, they have no sense of purpose, no sense of direction. So I think it's a real, you know, Matt talks about paradox a lot, right? So this is one of those paradoxes where you'd love to give it to them, but by giving them those resources, you're actually taking the struggle and the strengthening from that.
There's a lot to be said for that, because
And they're not financially independent. They're reliant.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. And I would agree. Yeah. Yeah, definitely adversity makes you stronger. I wouldn't even let them know. I would have to write it in the will that they don't have access until they're, 55.
They've struggled enough.
Yeah. They've got to, because you don't learn, you don't grow. The struggle is what it's about. I mean, not to the depths of being homeless. However, if they've never learned to value money, if they never learn the value of working hard and saving, then what's the point?
Yeah.
they have a saying in China that wealth does not pass 3 generations. Because there's somebody who's poor and pulls themselves up by their bootstraps and suddenly has a decent enough living that they can help their kids along, and then they become wealthy, and then they pass it along, and then eventually the kids stop learning that work ethic and they lose it all. And then there's a generation born in poverty. And this cycle has happened so much that it's become a homily in Chinese culture. And I really like this idea because it's a warning that if we spoil our kids and we remove the adversity from them, then there's no whetstone for their character. I think that there's a lot to this, that struggle does make you stronger, but there's also struggle that holds you back. And that's what I want to prevent my kids from going through, is what held me back in the past. Because I would be living a very different life if I had the basics covered during a specific 5-year period of my life. And instead I didn't. And the challenge that I'm facing right now is that this is my purpose, but as a thought leader running a practice, I don't feel comfortable championing this purpose that I want to take care of my kids. Most practices are based around a purpose of helping their customer. I want to help this customer become this person, and that's my purpose.
That's not the purpose, because the purpose is, you're talking about the purpose of the money, not the purpose of the practice.
Mm-hmm.
The purpose of the practice is to get the money to feed that purpose for your kids, but that's not the purpose of the practice. You could get that money from working at
So you're saying
for 1,000 hours a day.
there's actually separate purposes for the
Yes.
person, the practice.
You're talking about the purpose of what the money is doing, not the actual business. Because you could get that money you could find $1 million on the ground. You still have the same purpose, and it's got nothing to do with the practice. So they're two different things, I think.
That's really insightful. Thank you for sharing that. So what are your purposes in your practice?
I think what Kelly just said helped me think a bit about that specific point. I'm in it. I need to make a living, and I want to make a difference. And I have to separate those two. That I'm in the business because I need to make a living, but I've chosen this business because I want to make a difference in a certain area.
It's a vehicle. The practice is a vehicle for the purpose. It is not the purpose.
Right.
I love that, Aaron, that I need to make a living, but I want to make a difference. That's fantastic. Really powerful stuff.
It really is.
So yeah, those things kind of help me. And I think the motivation's different. I mean, what drives folks to, and I can see it at work and other places where there are people who are there, they are there only for the paycheck, as opposed to those who do what they do because they really are invested in the goals of that work and that service. It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. And I think it makes a difference if they are somehow connected. At least I see that. I think people who achieve at the highest levels love what they do and they've got to put in the work anyway. Let's talk about professional athletes for a moment. They love doing that sport, and it's not a coincidence. They'll put in the hours, and in many cases, combined with their natural talents, achieve at the highest levels. They need to make a living too, but they're trying to make a difference in their field as well.
So I would say my practice is all around enabling others to be more effective in getting what they want. And the foundation of all of that are communication skills.
Yeah.
What you say, how you say it, and being more effective in that realm, because I think that's the foundation of everything that we do.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, that really taps into human potential right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about you, Rumi?
I see for a lot of people, I think the last so much of, I think we talk about waste of money and time and all that kind of stuff. For me, the biggest waste is the human potential. People come collecting so much of intellectual property or experience and everything, and the last stage of their life is just totally wasted because they just could not find a way of maximizing what they have and the contribution they could make to the world. Not everybody is the same. Some people want to just play golf all day, and some people might just want to go and do some voluntary work or something like that. But there may be there's a group of people who would say, hey, I can still make a lot bigger contribution, but they won't know how to do it. So that's what drives me. That kind, yeah.
Great. What about you, Kelly? What's the purpose of your practice?
I think it's giving people the ability to understand and control their own personal brand, knowing that it's a long game for the rest of your life and your personal brand will outlive you. And I will never know the impact that I make on people because everyone's is different. And then I think something that I've been thinking about today is, I don't know if you've all been watching the news, but Kobe Bryant was killed in a helicopter accident and he was 41. But look at what he achieved. Look at his legacy. Look at his business. You're talking about athletes. You're talking about wasted potential. Like, I feel like he is the epitome of everything we've spoken about as a case study of achievement. And then he didn't wake up yesterday knowing he's going to be dead in a plane crash in 24 hours about the finite amount of time that you have. So I feel like there's something in that for all of us in all this thought leader stuff that we can probably, I don't know. I just think there's something in that.
Yeah. What about you, Matt? What is the purpose of your practice?
I think for me, it seems like a little bit of a trite answer, but it's fulfilling your purpose, either as a business, a team, or as an individual. That for me is really where I get switched on. I get excited about people coming together and fulfilling a purpose, whatever that purpose is, as long as it's noble. That's for me where I want to have an influence is just a little bit like what Rumi said around the waste of human potential. I see it often in the clients I engage with, where you have teams that are full of great individuals, but they're not operating as a team, or individuals who spend a lot of time dreaming about things but never put the wheels on it. And those are the areas where I feel that I can have the most impact, and where I feel like I could be happy. If the question I ask myself is, if I didn't get paid for this or I didn't need the money, what would I do?
Right.
And for me, that just excites me no end.
That's great. Well, we are at the top of the hour, so I really appreciate everybody's time in talking about section 1 of this book with me. I'd like to take a quick screenshot. So can everybody say cheese?
Cheese.
Great. I'd like to share that online and let other people know that we are having great conversations about this book. And I'd like to talk to you again next week, same time, same channel, to talk about section 2. So thank you so much, everybody, for your time today. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm looking forward to talking with you again next week.
Thanks, Caitlin, and thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.